Okay, good morning. So, as we talk about stress, so it's something that we all deal with, sometimes more than others, and there's a lot of really good strategies on how to deal with it. It's unavoidable, and of course, you know, there's really severe types of stress, and then there's just daily types of stress. So, I should unlock this. So, some of the basic questions we're going to deal with today, or this week. How do we understand stress? Basically, what are the definition of stress? What are the causes? Now, in the Bernstein reading, it doesn't really go into a lot of the causes. The chapter modules is really going to do that. So again, I handed out that paper yesterday. It's module number 43. You might want to start with that. You might want to look at those specifics of module 43. And you don't have to do module 44, right? So the definition of stress, if you look at the questions, it's the definition of stress, what do we mean by appraise, etc. That's also in this presentation, but if you wanted to get the reading done, that would be, I think, helpful. And if you need me to, you know, push back some of this, I don't mind, as long as you know, we're going to cover most of it in class, but I really want you to read it so you can get the full understanding. It's really important that you don't just listen to the lecture, but you also read. It's really going to reinforce it. So we're going to talk about causes. How does it affect us physically and emotionally? This would be the psychological aspects, is our emotional responses to stress. Behaviors, that's another psych connection, is how do we manifest stress? Because we're going through stress, we can be irritable, and we can drink and smoke and use drugs to alleviate it. There's a lot of motivation behind that. So that's behaviors, and then personality aspects. Your personality is basically your characteristics, your traits. It's really what they describe your personality. So some personalities handle stress better than others. And I think all of this together is, if you know that you have a personality that doesn't process stress well, the question might be, can you impact it? Can you make decisions? Can you process it thinking cognitively to alleviate some of the stressful responses? Do you follow me? So there's a lot of implications to this. What do you think? Do you think you can, your cognitive abilities can transform your personality? In the book, they talk about type A and type B personalities, right? Well, when we get to personality, you'll really see it. Type A personalities are kind of compulsive and kind of obsessive about certain things. They're kind of aggressive. They're hard driving. I have some tendencies to be type A in some scenarios. In school, I can be kind of a type A, pushing and authoritarian and, want things a certain way. But at home, I'm type B. I don't do the dishes every day. But I'm pretty neat. Sometimes I don't shave. You want a really important type A personality, Mr. Richard. Mr. Richard is kind of, we call it, and Freudians would say he's anal retentive, or in kind of other types of psychological analysis, they would say he's obsessive compulsive about neatness. Every day before he leaves, he straightens all of his desks. He makes sure every single paper is lined up neatly. So the question I'm asking you is, if you have this personality characteristic, you generally manifest this type of trait. Can you change your behavior it with thinking, by thinking, cognitive aspects. What do you think? What do you think? Anybody with us?
Yes.
You think you can?
Yes.
How?
You can think things through before you do them.
Yeah. It's pretty hard though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because normally you just react normally. But with more information, it's kind of the point I'm trying to say. The more insight you have and the more self-assessment you do, you can change your behaviors, and it's all cognitive. Personality is very much nature, nurture. You grow up and you're shaped in certain behavioral ways, etc. Some of it's genetic, but this concept of your cognitive abilities to change your behavior comes with insight. If you know that it is possible, it's difficult though. You could potentially do it. And I think that's one of the big messages in this stress unit that we're doing, is that you do have power over stress. You do not have to be a victim of stress and have all the negative manifestations of stress if you know what to do. And I think that's one of the big real lessons, I think, in this kind of this unit. So hopefully all of these things were going to come out. Also, coping with stress. Sorry for getting that one. There's a lot of great strategies of how to cope with stress. If you didn't know some of these, man, you can alleviate a lot of it through processing cognitively and through other supports, etc. Like support groups and social support, which the book really talks about. So all of those things are things we're going to try to make sure you're clear on. So we all feel stress. The experience of being overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed this weekend, and I was like, I need to do a better job, and I'm not being effective, and that's what gets me stressful. And then of course my house, I'm building my house, and I don't have enough money. I need $20,000. Anybody have $20,000 they want to lend me? Yeah, I promise I won't hurt your grade. Yeah. Okay. Relationships, oh my gosh, I know a lot about stressful relationships. Deadlines, I don't have so many deadlines except grades, but that doesn't stress me out. Pressure, yeah, there's different types of pressure. You guys are probably doing a lot of this. Volunteering, sports, you're in music, you're in theater, you work. Oh, don't forget that. Some of you want to go to college. Grades, maybe some of you. Parents, maybe some of you. AP classes, not too many of you. Maybe poli-sci you might be stressing over, but your AP class you're probably not stressing too much. Raise your hand, you, I don't know, if you want to self-disclose. Raise your hand, you have relationship stress. It's always the boys, not the girls. Girls are in charge, aren't they? Deadlines. Anybody? Good. Your college apps, I'm sure. Volunteering. Okay. How about sports? Okay, for sure, that's a big one for some of us. How about music, like marching band and stuff? That's for fun.
Well, yes, a time commitment, but
it's not stress.
Not right now. Not really.
That's so good. How about college apps? Are they making you feel stressful? Yes. They should. They do. That's your whole future right there. Raise your hand. No. It's really a joke. Because once we go through the material, I think you're going to see that it's not as bad as you perceive it. We make things worse. We always make things worse than they really are. And it's one of the things that hopefully we're going to share with you ideas on how you can how you put things in perspective. This is just one thing in your busy life that you're going to deal with. And it's going to be fine. Especially if you really step back and look at all of that you've accomplished and look at all your capabilities and look at how long your life is going to be, and it's all about stepping out of your focus. I'm dying with all these things. I can't handle it. And then you step out and go, wait a minute, let's put it in perspective. Let's put it in this where it belongs. And you'll see that it's not so bad. But yeah, you guys all feel stress. You can all relate to stress. So big picture, main idea. Stress responses are physical, psychological, and behavioral. So physical meaning you get illnesses, it attacks your immune system. You can have psychosomatic responses. This is the big picture. So at the end of this unit, you should be able to describe physical problems or issues with stress, psychological examples, and behavioral examples. Okay? That's your goal, to make sure you know all that. It is a response to a challenge. A challenge is stress. I've read different, what are those things called? Things about stress. And some people say stress is other people. You ever heard that? Interacting with other people is, by definition, stress. For some people, I like doing it. But if like when parents come in, that's automatic stressor.
So, do you realize that if you put these videos online, any parent can see them?
I encourage them to. I'm proud of what I do.
Good.
I'm not afraid. And I have the union behind me. So. Stress occurs, but I started doing it with the history, and it's working, and the kids are using it. So I thought, hell, instead, it's probably easier for me if I don't have to go and explain everything to a kid who's absent. I'll say, go watch it online. Then it relieves me of some of my workload. So this is actually reducing my stress level by being videotaped. And it's all how I'm processing. It's how I think about it. Some people would be afraid. Richard, totally afraid. You'd never do it.
You'd be freaked out.
Richard's just afraid of technology.
A challenge or threat forces a person to adjust or adapt. This is another good example of stress. So if you have to, you have the traffic jam and you have to change your route. So if it forces you to change your view of the world or what you want to do, things of that nature. Stress is behavioral in terms of how we respond to it. Some people respond to stress by drinking heavily or taking drugs and medications and things of that nature to keep them calmer. Your health, bottom line, is affected by stress. You get more colds, you get sick, you don't heal as fast. It's biological consequences of the stress. Major risk factor for illness and disease. The easy way to understand this is that it's not necessarily the stressor unless it's like you're in a war zone and you could be killed. Okay, that's one. But this is the behavioral. Behavioral is a big one. Again, you have a stressful job, so you work all day and then you smoke cigarettes. The cigarette smoking is your behavioral response, and that's the health risk factor. The smoking is gonna kill you, or the drinking. It's gonna cause hypertension, heart disease, high blood pressure, things of that nature. Drinking, alcoholism is going to weaken your body. Yes?
Can chronic stress also cause weight gain because it overproduces cortisol?
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's a number of, I'm not sure if cortisol is the cause of weight gain, but for sure, behaviorally, some people deal with stress by eating.
No, I mean biologically. The stress causes cortisol.
I don't know the fat production of cortisol, but I do know that it does other things. So I'm not sure about cortisol causing fat growth. But I do know overeating is a stress response. Some people are upset, they process it in things that make them feel good. Eating is one of them.
Is it like you're eating more
Yeah, there's a lot of manifestations, a lot of behavioral manifestations, but the big idea is it's going to impact your health because of a emotional or a psychological issue impacts your health. Again, interaction with people. The body's reaction to stress damages the internal organs. Now this for sure is cortisol. Cortisol, which is the hormone that's produced in the stressful situations, it attacks your immune system and your organs. They weaken it. That's a big, big piece of this. So we'll look at it specifically how. Again, we already did that one. Do you want me to? Is this stress hormone produced, or is a hormone produced with stress? Okay, moving on.
No.
I did upload this. There is a section on the website that it's a stress, and this PowerPoint is on there if you don't get it all because we like to keep going. So you got the big idea so far? Your book is really going to talk about these types of stress: catastrophes, life changes, and daily hassles. Yes? Did you raise your hand? No. Okay. So these are kind of the really big ones. Most of us are here. Some of us have this. I had a lot of that. I don't think we have much of this. People in Aleppo are living in this, right? People in a war zone.
What's in Aleppo?
Aleppo? Are you serious?
I would joke you.
Okay. Are you running for president too? All the hipsters are going to vote for, what's that guy's name?
Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson, and then Trump will be president.
Yep.
It's impossible. America is smarter than that.
We like to think.
I mean,
I mean,
managed to elect Donald Trump within the
Well, let the.
No, that was only 25 million people. And that was before he was really over the top. Once he got his the nominee, then he's been going over and over crazy, even worse. He's a megalomaniac. He's like, he's energized by all the attention. He doesn't care what kind of attention it is. It's just, I love it. It's bad. Catastrophes are these large-scale, unplanned events, war, earthquakes, etc. Major emotional disruption. This is where you're getting major trauma, I would say, would be a catastrophe. People have trouble sleeping. There's lots of suicidal tendencies, trouble concentrating. This is related to PTSD, isn't it? And PTSD, by the way, does not have to be a catastrophe like this. PTSD can be more also, what was the other line? Life changes. Can be life changes. They can be incidents, but they can also be life changes. Divorce. Oh my God, you don't want to hear about divorce, but I had significant trouble concentrating, trouble sleeping, had to move. I wasn't necessarily physiologically damaged by it, but was very emotionally unstable and having major problems in the first year, 2 years of the divorce. This is 5 years now, and I'm pretty good right now. It could change any day, but you want to go back? So these are just basic elements you're going to see with stress, okay? Especially if it's intense. You also see this with depression. You also see this with anxiety. So, when you're thinking about stress, it's not just one thing. You get the stressor, and then you get the connections to it. Could be depressive responses or anxiousness, etc. And then all of it together, spinning around in your head, right? That's the major problem here. You got to be able to control it to some extent. All of these things are major, major problems. You call it clusters of crises when everything's going on at once, and then you throw in your emotional responses to it.
Well, leaving college.
Loneliness.
That's gonna be relief.
Sorry?
Oh, I said leaving college is gonna be relieving.
What?
It's gonna be relieving your stress.
Some kids never been away from home. Some kids never had dinner outside of the house, you know. Some parents are very protective. I don't know if there's any in this room, but some people, when they go to college, they have meltdowns and they get stressed out and they are in an alien environment. And, you know, the diathesis stress concept, which we're going to get to in a minute, really makes a difference. Loneliness is a big one, I think, for some people. And I just figured out, you know, remember we talked about what's that hormone that's released with hugging and...
Oxytocin.
Right, oxytocin, right? That's really important to have that. That's really important for normal emotional development. And if some people who don't have close family, don't have significant others in their life, there's a significant amount of time that they don't have human contact. That's problematic. Having been in that situation after my divorce, it was very distressing. What's one way you can alleviate this? I think, and this would be maybe some of you guys in science who can really know about this. What's another way you might be able to deal with this? It's a big thing now. Drug? Well, those would be behavioral responses. People are lonely; they turn to drugs and alcohol and self-medicating. But what's another one?
Social media.
Yeah, well, it's social media. You don't get the same response, but there's some connection with people. I don't know about that. That's probably not so popular.
I mean, I live with a little more medical.
An animal.
Oh, a doggy.
That was Kaylee K-Banku. Animals. What do we call those? Companion animals. I was talking to Edith about this and how important these things are when I'm making my lesson plan, and she says, Corazon, you know, that's what the companion animals do. You know, the service dogs and cats and stuff. Do you get the same, you know, you get a little puppy, you're like, I feel better, you know? Don't you think? I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, we should get a class pet.
I don't know how that would work, but I'm open to suggestions. I would love a turtle, a tortoise. Edith has a little chihuahua. It is a... You want to hear? So Edith has a little chihuahua, and I'll get her to send me a picture of it. Her name is Daisy. And it's got no hair, or maybe, I don't think it, I don't know. I've seen it a couple times, and it bit me like 3 times. But the dog is her little comfort, you know. She also has a son who's like giant. But the little dog is like her baby. And she's the one that reminded me, well, maybe animals can do it. I don't have any evidence to support this, whether the animals do release oxytocin, but it's a speculation I have. And so if you know somebody, you can verify it.
It also decreases like heart problems, like cardiovascular disease.
Because they're not smoking when they're playing
Well,
with
one thing that you like to take a dog out for a walk.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Listen, yeah.
And it's just like you said, it releases the, like, make you happier, so you wanna get outside more, like if you're really depressed, it'll release.
Yes.
Lower brow
So-
pressure.
This might be a strategy to get a dog or a cat or a pet that's hopefully it's responsive in some way.
Can I bring my dog to class?
Sure.
Japan also just developed a companion robot for women who have just gone through like a miscarriage or can't have babies.
Oh, a baby.
So basically it gives them it acts like a baby and takes place of it gives them that motherhood feeling.
In Japan, there's this I think this robot that's
I would never want that.
never grows up. Can't you just adopt it?
That's really hard. That's a lifelong commitment too. It's really. Well,
Well,
why,
you're ready to have a baby.
Yeah, so is
well,
having
why
a
don't?
kid.
But it's different.
Wait, how?
Adopting versus having your own child. But I would suggest a little open-mindedness and tolerance. If whatever, my personal view is, someone is in distress, whatever helps them, that's not so damaging. If it's not self-abuse or it's not, I know this is kind of serious for some of us. If you're not serious about it, it's okay, but you shouldn't be like making jokes. Seriously. Because some people are, the stuff in here that we're talking about, some people have bereavement issues right now, in this class probably. Some people are suffering from their parents having difficulty or their own things of that nature. So we want to try to keep it on a more serious level.
What is bereavement?
When someone, like a death, where you're having, potential depression and really anxiety, etc., over the loss of a loved one. It's really. Did you want to say something, Ellen?
No, I was gonna
Okay. Lots. So when we see this cluster of crises, is when all of these things are coming down at once. And again, you throw in your psychological elements to it, like depression. It exacerbates. It makes all of this stuff worse. And so we want to think of, how we know you're going to be encountering this. How can you process it? We're going to do a whole section on the grieving process. You guys heard of that? Kubler-Ross. You ever heard of this? In our developmental unit, Kubler-Ross is the big researcher who said there were 5 phases of bereavement. It's denial, bargaining, anger,
Depression, acceptance.
depression, and acceptance. Thank you. I get a mix. I think it's hard to remember all this. She was the pioneer that established this pattern. And is it really going to? Does it help to know the patterns? Yeah, it does. You know more information about how being in tune with your feelings and what's going on, the better you can process it, the better you can get through it. You still will probably go through it, and it will be very difficult, but it will hopefully be less damaging with more information. So again, all of these are major stressors that can be PTSD related if there's incidents. As I talked about my divorce a little bit, that I couldn't sleep, would have dreams, etc. Would bring back these feelings all the time. That's really hallmarks of PTSD. So if we know these are things that create huge stress, we got to think about how can we process it, what's going on physiologically. Daily hassles, we already know about these. I'm not going to spend much time on that. Again, teaching. Do you think is stressful?
Yeah.
But what's good about it is there are certain examples of how to mediate stress, how to process it, where some teachers don't have the negative consequences or physiological consequences of stress because the type of job it is, and also training, etc. Burnout. This is one I'm sure you know, you've seen people in your school career, and we don't want any names, that experience burnout. Then this is overly stressed and giving up pretty much. Nursing, teaching, police, social work are all related to burnout. Being physically and mentally and emotionally drained. You're just exhausted. Emotional exhausted, fatigue, apathetic, feeling all used up. Hallmarks of it, this would be a behavioral element to it. You miss work, you stop going to work. Cynicism, you don't care. Feeling reduced accomplishment, that's self-concept. Your self-concept is diminished. You're feeling helpless, hopeless, angry. Your work performance is not going well. Okay, I have that. Okay, I do that. I'm not accident prone. I don't oversleep. I don't do poor job performance. I don't do that. I'm not, okay, I'm irritable sometimes. I'm suspicious. I'm not withdrawn. Okay. So I only have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not enough to be burned out. Sorry? Well, when you're that's a good question. When you're diagnosing somebody for an illness, where's my abnormal book? Here. And you're welcome to look at this. When you're diagnosing someone with a specific criteria, there's usually pass that back to Kate. There's usually a time period. There's a time period, so within 2 weeks, you have some of how many of these characteristics or traits or.
So if you had circled like 6, would that be enough?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I would say. Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Depends on what the diagnostic criteria is. You guys know this term, DSM-5. That's a B. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. You have to learn this in abnormal, but so it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual number 5 for diagnosing mental disorders. And so it's a high bar that you have to reach. High level of criteria that you have to reach to be diagnosed with a significant disorder. Does that make sense? It's not just, oh, I feel depressed, I must have depression. No, you might have some tendency for depressive thoughts, but does that reach the full-blown diagnosis of a depressive disorder or anxiety, etc., etc.? You will have, times when you feel bad or times when you're overly anxious, but it's really high level to be diagnosed with something like this. But for me, self-diagnosed, no, I'm just busy. You could say these could also be personality aspects. These could be personality traits also. So it's much more complicated than just saying, oh, I have 5 of these. But these are classic associated with people with burnout. Burnout is the opposite of job engagement. Work is seen as important and meaningful and challenging. So burnout, you're just like, well, I'm just doing this for a paycheck. I have no meaning, no purpose. And I know, personally, I love this job. I don't think, it's either this or truck driving, Okay, so any questions on this? You'll see this is really well done in the reading. You don't have, since you've got all this, you really just skim over that if you haven't started already. PTSD, we talked briefly about that. A pattern of adverse reactions following a traumatic event. It's a huge, huge problem. A lot more people have it than you think. Anyone who's undergone a trauma probably has it to one degree. Is it preventing them from functioning? Perhaps not, but it's something going on in their consciousness. They're thinking about it. Any kind of something that it is, I would say, really impacts you emotionally. So, for example, my divorce was traumatic for me, and I had dreams, and I had a lot of these examples. Seeing a violent act, being a victim of a violent act, being beat up and things like that could cause it. Depends on how it affects you emotionally, how you respond to it. Some people, like in the military, highly trained soldiers can be involved in extremely horrific battle and not have it, not have a full-blown. It doesn't impact their behavior or their emotional abilities. But other soldiers have major issues with it, and it's kind of like hit and miss, I think. If you're trained, you can cope with it better and you can deal with it. If you are have a really strong and resilient kind of personality, you might be able to not have the severe, in my feelings, you might not have the severe reaction, but you still have it. You still manifest it in some ways. Your thinking, it's in your thinking, it's in your functioning. Again, inability to concentrate, sexual dysfunction, difficulty getting along with other people, sleep disorders, nightmares, startle responses, vivid memories, re-experiencing. That's a big one. This one you may not, on the outside you won't see it, but that's really going on. This one I had a lot of that. Depression, anxiety. Sleep disorders, very, very common. Nightmares are very common. And again, depending on the trauma, if it's long term, it can attack your immune system. We see it military, we see it traumatic events, assault, abuse, witnessing violence. Edith witnessed a guy get killed, not the whole. She was driving in Tijuana. There's a big drug war going on in Tijuana right now. You have cartels trying to take over the other cartel's territory in TJ, and so they end up killing everyone who's associated with that cartel. And so they're having like 12 murders a week in the streets. And she was driving in a middle class, the Rio district down there. I don't know, it's where the giant shopping malls and middle class TJ. And she was driving around one of the traffic circles, and like 5 minutes before she got there, a guy was assassinated or murdered because of the drug cartel thing. And she drove up on it, and she was like, "Oh my God!" She was upset. But that's another example. She's had a little bit of that now. She processes it better, and so she doesn't have those, horrible, ongoing, long-term consequences. But it is possible. Some research indicates some brain structures and functioning are permanently affected. Remember, we call that plasticity? And you see this with drug use. You see this with, different long-term experiences usually. If it's long-term and you don't process it and you don't get help, you could potentially have, your neurotransmitters are not in sync. You're not functioning the way you are, and so your brain changes in certain ways to address it or because of it. Yeah.
So plasticity could be a negative thing?
Yeah. Well, it just shows the brain is changing. Plasticity just means changing. So how is your brain changing? So you have more synapses are being created, related to the depression, or less, serotonin or dopamine is being released in the synapses, and so that's what they mean by brain structures. It's like you're not growing another piece of your brain or anything. But on the neural level, there are significant synaptic changes. Definitely, if you are ever involved in any kind of issue like this, go talk to somebody. really good technique is to get it out. And if, let's say you can't talk to somebody, write it out. Half of it is expressing what's pent up, and that will make you feel better. But definitely if you're having any kind of if you witness something of this nature, or you have things going on in your personal life at home, social support, as you'll see, is a really big, important one. But if you don't have that social support, you got to get it out somehow. Get it out, go to a support group, or